Chapter 17-18. The first thing we're going to talk about is social influence on the self, which is social comparison. There's two types of social comparison, which are upward social comparison and downward social comparison. Upward social comparison is when you compare yourself to another better person, and downward social comparison is when you compare yourself to a lower person. These people who are being used as a social comparison are called reference groups. And social perception is how you perceive your own and other people while taking the information from other people. So the first thing is that there's a schema, which is the mental representation of knowledge. Is how we use to determine how we're going to judge people and how sometimes we can form biases based on this mental representation of knowledge. So some of the biases in social perception are first impression, fundamental attribution error, actor-observer effect, self-serving bias, and unrealistic optimism. So attribution. Attribution is the process of explaining the causes of people's behavior. In a theory made by Harold Cayley in 1973, he mentioned these three influential factors for attribution, which are consensus, consistency, and distinctiveness. So the three main factors of attribution consensus is the degree to which other people's behavior is similar to actor, which can be understood like in an example like in everyone's avoiding a person, then the other person will also avoid to that person. And consistency, the degree to which the behavior is the same across time or situation. So if a person always do something or certain action toward a certain situation, if the consistency is high, he or she would continue the action in different situations. Distinctiveness, the extent to which actors' response to one situation stands out from response to similar situation. So basically in an example like if a person favor everyone except person B, then distinctiveness is very high. And from those three factors we can predict what's the attribution, whether it's internal or external. So if it's low consensus but high consistency and low distinctiveness, it's internal attribution, which means that it is due to internal factors rather than external factors. And the other way around, if it's high consensus and low consistency and high distinctiveness, it's external attribution. So some of the errors in attribution is the out groups and in groups, which are basically the two social groups that we define as if out groups are people who are different from us, and in groups are people who are similar to us. So some of the errors in attribution are actor-observer effect and self-serving bias. Actor-observer effect is when we attribute our own behavior due to internal attribution, while others' failure due to external attribution. Because we tend to believe ourselves is doing fine, and our own failure is because of sometimes external problem. We tend to believe our behavior is due to internal attribution, and our failure is due to external attribution, and that will be self-serving bias. So when we attribute our own success to internal attribution while our own failure to external attribution. And these are some of the errors in attribution because of these biases attribution, we tend to believe the in-groups can always success because of the internal factor rather than external factors. So attitude, which is a predisposition toward a particular cognitive, emotional, or behavioral reaction to object, which is your own perception, your ideas toward a certain idea. So the main theory of attitude is self-perception theory, which can be understood by the perception pyramid in this diagram. So what we think will influence how the thoughts and our action, and eventually how we perceive the whole cognitive and relationship. So stereotypes and prejudice, which is based on the biases and attitudes mentioned in the previous slides. So stereotype is a false assumption that all members of the same group share same characteristics, and prejudice is a positive or negative attitude toward an entire group of people. These These two can be combined together and known as the discrimination when people have some certain ideas towards a certain group. Prejudice can be formed by three main reasons, which is the motivational theory, cognitive theory, and learning theories. Motivational theories mention that people form stereotypes and prejudice because they want to have some sense of security and help them to meet personal needs, which means that in order to meet these emotional needs, people need to form stereotypes and prejudice towards certain social groups. And for cognitive theory, people form stereotypes and prejudice because they want to organize all the information in an organized way. So therefore, they will make some categorization assumption towards social groups, which sometimes can be lead to prejudice and stereotypes. And for the last one, the learning theory, it is based on the environment and how we learn these stereotypes and prejudice when we're young or from other people or from our environment. So interpersonal attraction. People are tend to be attracted to people who are similar to them. So based on the attraction, the similarity, people people are more attracted to person who have the same similar characteristic or similar personality, and also physical attractiveness. So there's a matching hypothesis, which is the notion that people are most likely to form relationships who are similar who have similar physical attractiveness. And there's and also the environment will also affect the interpersonal attraction. And the most example for interpersonal attraction is love and marriage. So this is the triangular theory of love made by Sternberg, which shows that a consummate love can be determined by three main factors, which are passion, commitment, and intimacy. And these three factors, different combination can form different kind of love, and which is also the interpersonal relationship between people. Also, in summary, for chapter 17, we talked about social comparison, which is how we compare ourselves to other people, and social perception, which is how we explain others' behavior and how we perceive others based on our own internal or external factors, and attitudes, which is the way we perceive the cognitive or emotional events, and these things can lead to prejudice or stereotypes, which can be either learned or because of motivational needs. Yeah. And finally, the interpersonal attraction, which is how people interact with each other due to similar characteristic or similar personality or similar physical appearance. Chapter 18, Social Influence. So the first thing we're going to talk about in chapter 18, social norms. There are two types of social norms, which are descriptive norms and injunctive norms. Descriptive norms are norms that how most other people actually behave in a given situation, and injunctive norms is a specific social norm that about a specific action that find acceptable and those who find unacceptable. These social norms help us to decide why we do such things in a group rather than individually. And there's a word reciprocity, which is the type of injunctive norms. While when another person do a favor to you, we tend to do similar favor back to them. And and these social norms causes the individuation, which is the loss of individuality in a group when we're in a group. So we tend to do certain action or certain behavior in a group rather than doing it alone. So when we're doing a task and when there's other presenting, it usually affects one's performance. So it will cause an improvement or reduction of a performance. So the improvement of performance is called social facilitation, and the reduction is called social. And also sometimes there's a social loafing, which which happens when people exert less effort in a group rather than individually. So this happens when people are doing a group work. They tend to believe that others will also do the work, so therefore they will exert less effort as they were to be alone doing the task. So conformity and compliance. These two terms are similar, but they are different in some ways. Conformity is a change of one's behavior due to group's pressure. So basically it's a change of behavior due to a group's hidden pressure when groups have some suggestion that people need to change in order to fit to the group. And compliance is a change of behavior due to explicit or implicit requests. So it's basically a favor or a request that asks a person to change his behavior. So an explicit request can be a favor request when people ask for a favor to do something. An implicit request can be just a look or a face expression that people will understand without explicitly shown. For conformity, why do people conform? It is due to three influential factors, which are people want to be correct, people want to be others to accept them, and people want to increase self-worthiness. To conform into a group, people will tend to believe that the group, or rather than the public, is correct, so therefore they should be conformed in order to be correct. And when they conform, people can be accepted to them because they're all the same. And also, because of fitting to a group or conform to a group, they have increased their self-worthiness. The influence of conformity can also be determined by the size of the majority, or rather the size of minority. When the social group or the majority, the size is very big, the conformity will be very strong to influence the person because how other people have already conformed, the rest of people will tend to be conform as well. So compliance is the change of behavior due to a request, either in the explicit or implicit forms. So there are three techniques for the compliance, which are foot in the door technique, door in the face technique, or low ball technique. Foot in the door technique is basically using smaller requests and then gradually becomes a bigger request, so people will tend to because of the compliance they'll tend to believe and agree to your request and then follow your request. Door in the face technique is using the opposite way, while the person first offer a big and unrealistic request to a person, and the person will and the person who will be asked for the favor will tend to decline it, but the person who asked for the favor can now offer another secondary or compromise favor for the person to which is usually what person really wants. And the low is the technique that people use to sell cars or sell other objects. When people are agreed to a certain things, they will tend to agree to the rest of things because they feel obligated to complete the favor. In a famous example made by Stanley Milgrams, where people are asked to give high amount of voltage to the experiment to be obedient to the authority. So according to the study, obedience can come from excess power and legitimate power. So when people are in authority or have a legitimate source like being an expert, people will tend to be obedient and tend to follow that person's order no matter if the order is very irrational or rational. So people tend to be obedient to authority. So a famous example would be the German soldiers World War II when they follow their orders from the German authority to kill all the Jews while none of them to believe the action is wrong because they are all being obedient to the authority. So the aggression. Aggression is an act that is intending to cause harm to another person. This can be due to biological mechanism, cultural factors, and aversively stimulated aggression theory. For biological mechanism, aggression this can be caused by the defense aggression, which is the aggression that used to defend the person. So in order to in the evolutionary theory, it can be used to help a person to survive or protect themselves from danger. Another reason for aggression can be the high level of testosterone, which is a male hormone present in both sexes and can play an important role in aggression. There's a study shows that when people has a high level of testosterone, they tend to have a higher aggression. Aggression can also be caused by cultural factors, which how culture and how society has taught the person with aggression. So if a person has been grew up in a aggressive community or aggressive environment, that person will tend to learn it and tend to be aggressive when the person grows up. So the third theory was aversive stimuli aggression theory, which shows that stress and frustration will eventually lead to aggression. So when a person is under stress or frustration, they will lead to tend to lead to aggression and do some violent action. So next thing is altruism helping behavior, which is the opposite of aggression, which is how people are actually helping others without asking for another favor. So altruism is an unselfish way of helping others. The reason why people want to be altruistic or rather be helping others because they want to gain social approval. So there's two theory regarding the helping behavior, which are arousal cost reward theory and the bystander. Arousal cost reward theory emphasizes how people want to help others because it can relieve their own pain and own stress and own anxiety when they see others are in pain. So by giving them their ability to help others, they can relieve their own stress and anxiety. And there's a specific factor for the arousal cost reward theory, which is the clarity of the need for help. So if the help if the subject doesn't show a certain amount of need for help, the, the other person won't necessarily be able to help and won't necessarily be willing to sacrifice themselves to help others. And then there's a bystander effect, which shows that people tend to help others when they're alone rather than a group, because in a group they will believe that the other people will have the same responsibility of to help them, and others might have just helped them without making the responsibility to themselves. So helping behavior, there's another two theory, which is the empathy altruism theory and evolutionary theory. So according to empathy altruism theory, people sometimes help others for altruistic reasons. So it is due to an instinct and genetics that people want to help others. And in evolutionary theory, people help relatives because it increases the helpers genes in the future generation, which shows that in all the history of evolution, people tend to help others not because they can help others to relieve their pain, but because it can increases that kind of gene in the future generation, which can be benefits to their offsprings. And cooperation conflict is how people interact with each other. There's always a cooperation to success, or there's a conflict or competition. So there's a keyword which is a social dilemma. A situation in which actions that produce rewards for one individual will produce negative consequences if adopted by everyone. So social dilemma is basically how people need to choose between cooperate with each other for greater benefits or rather be staying individually. So the famous example for social dilemma is the prisoner's dilemma game, where two subjects or two prisoners needs to either cooperate with each other for greater benefits, or they can choose to be individual and receive a smaller benefits. So, so society tend to be promoting cooperation because studies have shown that cooperation can often re, often leads to success, and but also at the same time, when cooperation doesn't work, there also a big interpersonal conflict, which is competition. So group process. There's two types of leader, which are task motivated leader and relationship motivated leader. These are two ways of being two ways a method that will be adopted in a group process. For task motivated leader, it emphasizes on close supervision and discourage group discussion, which is more like emphasizing tasks are being done and how individually can achieve the task rather than focus on the relationship. So relationship motivated leader focus more on the individual's feeling and more concerned about how the group form as a relationship and how does everyone forms as a group to achieve the task. So these are just two ways of how group process can work. Both of them can work to the same result, but their methods different. So in summary for chapter 18, we talk about social norms, which is how people can do some certain action in a group rather than being alone. And conformity and compliance, how people conform to a certain group and why people do such favors com- or conform to a group. And obedience is how people are being obedient to the authority when they have a legitimate or authority source. Aggression is how people want to be aggressive to others, and it can be due to natural instinct or biological mechanism or because of a cultural influence. And altruism is how people are willing to sacrifice themselves to help others. It can be due to again evolutionary theory or because of the culture and also the environment. So uh, finally, the group process. Group process focuses on both how people interact each other and how people achieve a certain task within a group. The end.